Listen to the radio interview and interaction with citizens that the Burkinabe President Captain Ibrahim Traore had on RTB Radio on the Saturday of October 5, 2024, on the occasion of the second anniversary of his coming to power and second anniversary of the transition. It's an interview in which the youthful leader talks about recent destabilization projects and terror attacks like the Bara-logo attack, the successes that the military has so far registered, massive military equipments that have been acquired, extradition of former President Paul-Henri Dimiba, and as well vows that the military will in the coming few days resume a ruthless war on terrorists, which will see it reconquer the remaining 30% of the territory now that the rainy season is coming to an end. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to the special direct antenna on Radio Burkina devoted to the grand oral of the President of Faso Captain Ibrahim Traore, on the occasion of the second year of the transition. RTB Radio allows you to interact with the head of state for about an hour, on current issues of defense and the fight against terrorism and other subjects of national interest live from the presidential palace of Kuluba, like a captain at the helm, caught in a storm and opinions. Captain Ibrahim Traore took command of a Burkina Faso that was faced with security, social and economic storms. During these 2 years, the President of Faso had to navigate through the waves of challenges that we all know, while staying on course towards regained sovereignty and a future of peace and stability. Today, we are stopping to review the course followed, obstacles overcome and the horizons that are emerging. Listeners of the synchronized network of Radio Burkina and partner radios, participate in the program by calling 25 30 49 93 and 25 33 37. My colleague Hervé Kabore will take care of collecting your concerns and bringing them to the attention of Mr. President here live from the Kuluba Palace. The telephone lines are already open. Mr. President, good morning. Good morning, Madam. Thank you for taking part in this exercise on Radio Burkina through the live broadcast. Before collecting the first questions from listeners, Excellency, this is the first time that you are speaking directly to all Burkinabes across the areas of Burkina. How do you feel about sharing this live moment with the Burkinabes? Thank you very much and good morning, dear parents, dear brothers and sisters, listeners of Radio Burkina. Thank you, Madam, for this opportunity that has been given to us once again to be able to commune directly with the people. So I think it is a real pleasure, and it is also a moment for me to be able to understand today at the stage where we are, the current aspirations of the people through your channels, and to be able to readjust our program if we can say so. So I say that it is a great moment of pleasure, and thank you again for this opportunity. Thank you, Mr. President, for these first words. We will now address the first axis of our exchange devoted to current events. Already the first questions from the listeners are starting to fall on the 25 30 49 93 and the 25 33 37. We welcome Hervé Kabore, who will give us the first question. Thank you, Chantal Nikema. Your Excellence, Mr. President, the first question comes to us from Sector 16 of Ouagadougou. Stéphane Kemtore wants to know how you experience the multiple attempts at destabilization, with your assassination in sight. Second question is from Madame Kone from Bobo Dioulasso. She wants to know the fate that will be reserved for the conspirators, and then still in Bobo Dioulasso, it is Daniel Sanu, who asks if an arrest warrant has been issued against the destabilizers and their accomplices. And Eugene Cambires from Tambi would like to know what really happened in Bara-logo, for it is also the question of Suleiman from Kaya in the North Center, and Salafou Sanu in Bobo Dioulasso. And then the last question is Jean from Ouagadougou would like to have your reaction on the political orientation speech of the late Captain Thomas Sankara. In full celebration of the national days of patriotic commitment and citizen participation, what importance wakes up for you to develop it when we see that its content is still relevant? Thank you. Thank you, Hervé Kabore, for this first series of questions from listeners. Mr. President, you have just heard the concerns of the listeners that revolve around the desire for destabilization and in particular with the attack on Bara-logo. The listeners would like to know if you have experienced these situations. Okay. Thank you, madam. So I would say that this is really current. The questions of destabilization are current questions. Before we embark on this mission, I think that there are a certain number of risks that we must measure and agree to assume. And among these risks, there is the fact of not succeeding in the mission for which we had come. So when we come, it is either it makes or breaks. Thank God we were able to succeed in the mission to be able to therefore imprint our vision of things on our country. After that, the other risk is to agree to abandon everything. We cannot as a young person be there, at the top of the state, and perhaps want to find myself under the mango eating like the others. That is to say, agree to forget one's youth, agree to forget life and devote oneself entirely to the homeland. One of the risks is this situation that we are experiencing, destabilization, because if you want to right the ship of such a country, you are bound to take action. And by taking action to right it, you create internal and external enemies. We must therefore expect these situations of destabilization, assassination and everything. Because we have affected the interests of many people, and there is social inequality, there is corruption, there is poor management of public affairs, and if we try to want to regress all that, we will inevitably affect the individual interests of certain people, and these people are very often rich, have money and use this to manipulate people who are often poorer than them, and to in fact turn them against us. That is internal, and these beautiful people do not hesitate to join forces with the imperialist forces who spend their time in mourning to impoverish us. Our thoughts are on these external forces. There are many countries today that we have turned our backs on, and we have no choice, we must do it. If we want our homeland to be independent, if we want our sovereignty, if we want the Burkinabes to eat to their fill, if we want children to go to school without paying a franc, if we want to tackle malaria, which is one of the most widespread diseases in Burkina Faso, to be able to treat our population in certain words at 0 francs. These are some of the dreams that we have, but we will have to make many concessions, we will have to prevent certain powers from plundering us, and that creates many enemies. So we are prepared for these situations. We in fact experience them as normal, so that does not shake us, it does not scare us, and it still gives us the courage to move forward, because through these events, we know that the guideline that we have chosen is the best line for our homeland, for our people. So we experience the thing like that, as well as the conspirators. We spent 2 years raising awareness, to speak, to warn. People found that we were warning too much. But it was necessary so that the Burkinabes see for themselves how far some Burkinabes can go against the homeland. If we had started to crack down in a certain way from the beginning, it is not obvious that you yourself would have understood us. You will perhaps say, well, after a while, there may be incomprehension. And I think that Captain Thomas Sankara was misunderstood at one point, perhaps because they started strong, but it was necessary to let the people see and understand what it is like. The people know everything that we have done, and today I believe that people have understood a lot. Okay, the listener would like to know what is the fate reserved for these conspirators. As we have said from this moment, I will not go into details and everyone will assume responsibility. If someone takes steps like that, they assume all the consequences. We are not going to advise anyone anymore, or warn again. So we're going to come back to the case of Bara-logo. There is a listener who would like to know what really happened. Bara-logo, I'm not going to go into details, but I think that I was personally targeted, because there is a story. Bara-logo and the situation in the country has a story. Here, in June 2022, you may be able to find out on site. In Bara-logo, I defied a lot of order to interpose it, so that Bara-logo would not fall. So I sacrificed a lot of things to see that Bara-logo is rising, and I would like to thank the many people who supported us in our maneuver so that Bara-logo would be, and I think they targeted Bara-logo because it would affect me. That was the goal. I don't want to go into certain details, but hey, maybe one day we will have the opportunity to talk about it. Okay, so your reaction to the political orientation speech of the late Captain Thomas Sankara is a concern of the fields of Ouagadougou. It is true that we have also chosen the date of October 2nd for the launch of the Patriotic Days of Patriotic Commitment. It is precisely to corroborate with the DOP because this speech is a reference, and I think that some countries have had to use it. Our sub-region has used this reference to develop, and they make us understand it because they have drawn a lot of things from this speech. And it is current, we are inspired by it, and we adapt to the context too. That is because perhaps there were certain things in his time in '83 that can no longer be done today, but we adapt it as we go along. And as we said, Thomas Sankara was too ahead of his time, and I think that all this means that he has not been understood. He was not understood because he saw things that others did not have the possibility of seeing. His vision was much more advanced, but today we realize that we should have listened, that we should every time ask ourselves these questions, that we should ask ourselves what people should and should not have, and well, it is not that it has already happened, but I think that it is a current discourse. It is the same vision for a total sovereignty of our country. And I think that we must subscribe to this momentum. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, you are following a direct special program with the President of Faso live from the Palace on Radio Burkina. You can interact with the President of Faso by calling 25 30 49 93 and 25 33 33 37. Mr. President, we will now focus on a crucial subject of security and defense, and for that, we find again Hervé Kabore to connect us with the questions and concerns of the listeners. Hervé Kabore is not available, Mr. President. So before Hervé Kabore joins us, I would like to know, what is the morale of the troops with these destabilizations? I would say that the morale of the troops is at its best because committing to defend the homeland, you know, when you are a soldier and there is another natural state of mind that is there within the army, it is healthy. And getting up, taking your backpack, your army, going to the front is not given to everyone, but generally in the mind of the soldier when he leaves, it is with pride that he leaves. He knows what can happen, but it is with pride that he leaves. And today, with what we have put in place, it is that we are trying to make an effort through the support of the people. Many soldiers are really proud to be soldiers. That's it, that's sir, that they give their all and with all the support that the people also give them. I think that it can only boost morale. It is true that this situation of destabilization does not affect them, but it gives them even more courage to fight. They understand better why they must fight for their country. They know very well that it is not for nothing that they are trying to destabilize us, despite the fact that we were able to change the situation in terms of recruitment, equipment and training in a short period of time. If people are still trying to destabilize, it gives more arguments to the military to boost their morale and fight. Thank you. Hervé Kabore joins us for questions from listeners. Hervé, it's your turn. Yes, Chantal, it's Mr. Alassane calling us from Kaya in the north-central region. He asks that after the Bara-logo attack, public opinion wonders if sanctions have already been applied against those responsible and accomplices. Where are we in terms of justice and reparation for this tragedy? That's the question of the gentleman in the meantime. Thank you, Hervé. Mr. President, you have the floor to answer the gentleman. Okay, thank you. It must be said that after every attack, since we have been here, after each attack, we try to do an analysis of the situation to understand what worked and what did not work. As long as we do not manage to do it, we cannot improve the situation. So naturally, after the plaque on the military level, we must analyze what happened, what worked, what did not work. So we are almost at the end of this investigation. I think that the military authorities have gone to Bara-logo several times to investigate, and continue to also investigate throughout, and those responsible will be located within a few days. I am waiting for the result of the report, and the sanctions will fall. It is how I will say, for all the attacks, that is what we do. And if you notice, there have been attacks where we are often led to certain people who have failed in their duty. Because we have no choice as long as we commit ourselves, and we feel that the flaw comes from the system, and we must take action. So we are waiting for the final report to act. And what is natural about the victims is that we have adopted laws so that the children of those who may have lost their lives in this war are taken in as the nation's P. And those who have fallen are also taken in as martyrs. So if you follow, even the Council of Ministers passed it, and 236 children, or I mean 236 or 238 children who were orphaned were declared P of the nation. It will be similar treatment as and when it happens, but for the moment, the government is permanently alongside the populations there to be able to take care of all the psychological issues, the humanitarian issues, health, and all the members of the families who were injured during this tragedy. Hervé Kabore has questions from the listeners. He joins us once again. Yes, Chantal, the listeners have again sent current questions. It is Mr. Thomas Kafando from Zignare, who in relation to the least of the local consumer asks what are the strategies for an endogenous development, based on products made in Burkina. And then Mr. Karim Zongo from Fada asks, you have government teams who are currently meeting with the customary leaders, what are your expectations? Thank you, Hervé, for these two questions, Mr. President. Okay. Thank you very much. I see that the least to consume locally, we launched it and it is very important to us. If you notice first on the clothing plan, the first actions that we had to take, we did an analysis of a certain number of factors. First, we must promote what our artisans are implementing. So there are many things that we are trying to promote that are done locally and in several other areas, especially in processed products. So currently we are in the dynamic of promoting all those who manage to transform our raw materials, that is to say food products, so that they are consumed by the Burkinabes. Which also led us to recently issue a decree to establish the fact that if someone wants to import a product, no matter the product, as long as there are Burkinabes who manufacture it, they are obliged first to take from Burkina, and when that is not enough, now they can go and take from outside. So it is a strong act that we have taken to be able to encourage those who produce locally and for it to be consumed by the Burkinabes. So on this aspect, I think we are in a good dynamic. We cannot reveal the entire strategy to come because, as I said, those who are used to importing, they do not necessarily like to apply what we want. But if we want to be Burkinabes, we are obliged to take necessary measures, and it will not please others, but it will please the majority. And I think that is what is most important. Thank you for this information, Mr. President. Current events, security and defense are closely linked. While waiting to hear the concerns of the listeners, it has now been 2 years since under your leadership Burkina Faso began a total war against armed terrorist groups. Today, what is your assessment of the reconquest of the national territory? Okay, thank you. We will not stop talking about the situation on the ground because it is the very essence of our fight. And as you have been able to see, I think that as soon as we began our actions, there was another face of terrorism that the Burkinabes have discovered that has challenged us a lot, that it is not just terrorism. I think that the objective of these people is even greater than that of the last time. I was talking about fourth-generation warfare, so they have manipulated a lot of people to set them against their brothers. Today, if you look at both the terrorists and among us, it is young people who are dying. And therefore we must slow this down, we must stop this quickly. To do this, we had to arm ourselves with courage, train, recruit the workforce, and find the equipment. Nothing was up to the task of being able to cope, and I remember that the terrorists had said that on December 31, 2022, they were going to celebrate the end of the year in Ouagadougou, and then when we did the analysis, we realized that they could do it. What was going to stop them? I don't see, especially with the numbers they had, the sleeper cells and all. Today the army is much better equipped than it has ever been, but we say that this is nothing. The equipment will come 10 times, many times more efficient than what we have. We will continue to recruit to have a strong army because to find independence or sovereignty, as long as you do not have a strong army, you cannot assume yourself. So it will continue in this direction, and we will continue to face the threat in this way. Concerning the fight against terrorism, some Burkinabes make the link between national reconciliation and the fight against terrorism. Do you understand their logic, Mr. President? It is one that has excited many people, but people must stop getting carried away with it. National reconciliation, who is in conflict with whom? We must ask ourselves the question. We are in conflict with armed bandits who kill indiscriminately. We do not want to reconcile with them. If this is what people call reconciliation, we do not want this reconciliation. Either they stop, they lay down their weapons and commit to the Republic, but we cannot let people who are killing us and sit down to talk about reconciliation. No, we are going to fight. We will fight until they themselves raise the white flags and come, and we will see. So these are terms that some people often use without even knowing what they're about. We receive some in this sense too. And people who write to us to supposedly give us strategies in the sense of social cohesion and everything and national reconciliation. But when you read deep down, listen, you can't reconcile people supposedly reconcile that way. There are people who have destroyed this country. If they have legal problems or problems with society, we have to solve the problem. We have to make people recognize or perhaps pay for what they have done or what they have plundered and everything before we talk about reconciliation. It is not about sweeping all that aside and saying in the name of reconciliation, it is necessary, it is not going to stop, it is going to continue, that is impunity. In the meantime, we are meeting Hervé Kabore for a series of questions on security and defense. Hervé Kabore. Yes, Chantal Nikima, Clement Gwingde is calling us from Bobo Dioulasso. He says that he notes with pride the rise in power of the Burkinabe army, and would like to know if the President could reassure that the remaining 30% will be reconquered in 2025. Thank you, Hervé, for this series of questions. We will start with the climate issue on the reconquest of the national territory. 70% has been reconquered. What awaits is the remaining 30%. The hope is that tomorrow we can reconquer the 30%, and we will do it. But still, we will get to work quickly. If you notice recently, the intensity of operations has dropped a little due to the rainy season. The rainy season is ending, so operations will resume. I was telling some people that the equipment that I recently handed over to the forces, no one has seen it on the ground yet. So people are training very well, and are currently ready. So in a few days, the fight will resume more vigorously, and we hope to go very quickly to reconquer the maximum, to regreen as much as possible. When we say regreen in our jargon, it means to have spaces where people can do their tourism, do everything they want in complete freedom, really free as we say, without fear. So that's what we are developing, and it is done in tandem with defense and security, because as much as the forces that are on the front line evolve, it is necessary that at the rear we reorganize the security forces to be able to ensure the complete tranquility of the populations. So we are continuing. 2025 is decisive, and we are going to move in this direction so that we can reconquer the 30% soonest. Okay. Given that the forests are the nest of armed terrorist groups, has the government planned, or has a plan for equipping and deploying water and forests to free and consolidate these forests, Mr. President? We are on this because the water and forests, it must be said, when we arrived, we tried to assess the situation. It was unfortunately a bitter observation. They were there in their post. As I said, you could find 10 water and forest agents in a post with only one weapon. So if you go years without touching a weapon, it is a little complicated to say today that we can inject them directly into the forests. The forests are battlefields, so there are soldiers currently. It is the soldiers who search the forests. It will be them who will free the forests before installing the waters and forests for consolidation. And we continue the recycling of waters and forests. If you mark it, there are certain units that we have taken a little bit that we try to recycle and upgrade them so that when the soldiers will finish certain portions they now settle. And it has started. There are certain forests from the inside that were freed by the soldiers, and the waters and forests that were recycled have re-equipped themselves. So we have re-equipped them, and gradually we continue to increase their firepower so that they can contain after the passage of the soldiers. We will return to the second part of questions from claimant Gwegwemda, who asks, what do you answer to those who think that you should devote yourself solely to the war? No, there are people who know too much. Also, I do not know how now they analyze the situation. What led to the war? We must ask ourselves a lot of questions. Certainly our external powers manipulate people, but what makes them succeed in manipulating people? We must ask ourselves questions, and I think that I have already spoken on these subjects. We cannot wage war today without developing. If you do, it is because you are making a mistake. And I said that if we only focus on war, we will kill all the young people of Burkina. If they have nothing to do, they will be recruited either by these individuals who come from outside to sell them false illusions, or some will start robberies and everything. Today in some areas, robbers are almost confused with terrorists, because if you go out on a road and start stopping buses and you come across a patrol, they will fight you like a terrorist. But if young people don't have to work, what will they end up doing? It's said that this is the era of all vices. So we can't wage war without developing. We have to create jobs, we have to keep young people busy, so that some who had the intention of going towards uncomfortable routes can stay, concentrate and work. So these people who say that we just need security, I think that either they are not in good faith or they do not understand exactly what this war is. So why did the developed countries spend this kind of war there? It is in our so-called poor, impoverished countries. So we have to take into account our wealth and give jobs to the youth, and I think that goes with security. Still in the field of security, Diallo Aona would like to know if there are plans to open police stations in municipalities that do not have one. If you have been following, there was one of the Council of Ministers where we modified the security architecture. So the gendarmerie will take care of certain municipalities, that is rural ones, and the police will refocus on certain urban municipalities. So this redrawing has been done, and we have given these two forces a deadline to reorganize and adapt. And I think that it has already started in several areas, and the police have started to take up the positions, and the gendarmes will also go to these positions. For the end of the directory, there were many municipalities where there is no police station or gendarmerie, and we find ourselves in certain municipalities and certain cities where the posts are duplicated. The police and gendarmerie are there together and trample each other, and they cannot do the work that is necessary. So it is based on this observation that we decided to take a text to situate the geographical area of responsibility of each, so that all the municipalities have the presence of a security force. So that is what is going to happen, and in the decree, there is an implementation deadline that no one must exceed, and we are following that to prepare. Thank you, Mr. President. We still remain on the defense and security aspect. The security situation remains difficult in certain regions. What are the main obstacles to securing the country? And surely the law of request that the government plans for the engaged VDPs whose age is advanced and who cannot be recruited, like some in Sawadogo, and I have one internally displaced person from Madiri who asks nationals from the eastern region use numbers from Benin for calls to Burkina. Their behavior seems suspicious. Why are they not arrested? And then Sadou Bakar of the high basins of Bobo Dioulasso says the denunciation of the agreements with France marked a decisive turning point in Burkina's foreign policy. What is the impact of this decision, and what impact this decision had on our security and our international alliances? Thank you. Thank you, Eric Kabore, for this series of questions. Mr. President, we will start with the question from Mrs. Traore, Marian Traore, on securing the country. It must be said that, as we said right away, I was talking about the term of making spaces completely green, and we can have reconquered territories resettled by forces, but the enemy can still often make incursions because it is a guerrilla war and it can happen. Today, as I said, we have prepared some logistics to launch in the next few days. The rain is almost over, the phase which must arrive at completely redoing certain areas. And this phase, we cannot detail it here. It will be major works. Certainly there will be a lot of things that will be done. And so it is necessary that for the moment the areas that we have reconquered and which are experiencing incursions, it's just a matter of time, and we will re-green these areas, so that people can no longer make incursions, and all that, which also led us to reorganize the security forces so that when we are going to put this system in place, everyone settles in the area where they should be. When they are there, the intelligence and with the VDP who are on site must make it possible to prevent any incursion. So it is a process, and I think that everything is ready so that areas are completely green as we go along. Okay, the VDPs participate in the reconquest of the territory, and the law would like to know what is the fate reserved for these committed VDPs, whose age is advanced and who cannot be recruited, like some in the civil service and others. Yes, we have our plan for their reconversion, and it's also like in the military, where for those who are reaching retirement, if you notice with the Presidential Initiative for Food Self-Sufficiency, we have already launched a program in the army. There are reports on it to teach certain military personnel who are of a certain age to gradually retrain in agriculture, livestock farming, or certain professions of their choice. That's because there are also people who have specialties and who have been geniuses, and they can be in other companies and realize there is their potential there. So it will be the same thing for the VDPs. Already when I went once to Bagre and I spoke with VDPs there, I saw that there were many elderly people who could not be recruited and who had already asked to have land on the edge of certain water points for agriculture. So we instructed the BVDP to do everything possible so that these people can settle and produce. So we encourage the VDPs to do that too, which has started in certain places. If you notice, they are waging war and they are producing at the same time, and at the same time they are training, and we would like, when we want to disengage them, that we can support them to settle in their preferred field to continue in their effort of contribution to the development of Burkina Faso. We leave to go to the bull with the gentleman who speaks about the denunciation of the agreements with France, which marked a turning point in Burkina's foreign policy. What impact does this decision have on our security and our international alliances? I said earlier that our action is intrinsically linked to many people abroad, so the denunciation of these agreements is one thing, but it's not only that. There are other things that are not visible, that people have not perceived. There were other forces in addition to the French forces here. For example, that we made leave, they left in silence without really making noise, but people didn't realize. They didn't leave because they wanted to, because they were happy, but they continue to act against us. I take, for example, we are talking about the agreements with France. There were mining permits here that have been given to powers that also flatly refused to accompany us and everything. As of today, there are a good number of permits that I have already withdrawn, and we will continue to withdraw. What do you think? It will necessarily influence us because they are not necessarily happy about the security aspect that we are preparing. That is why at the very beginning, for example, we did not talk about permits. We are waiting to be at a certain level before separating, and I think that there is necessarily a link, and we have taken this data into account. We are recruiting, and over the last 2 years, I think we are at more than 30,000 people recruited almost in the army alone, and the other forces have also recruited. We have doubled, if not even more, the massive force at the level of the land army to be able to cope, but we are also starting at a slightly slow pace, because there are a lot of things that need to be done around recruitment. If you noticed, we recruited 5,000 at one time, then we went to 10,000, and today we are at almost 15,000, because we must not rush it. And this is the opportunity, therefore, to thank certain countries, in particular the countries of the AES, which gave us a helping hand at the start. Niger, we sent troops to Niger to train, we sent troops to Mali to train, we have sent some to Togo. Today, since we have taken our destiny in our hands, as they say, most of the European countries which offered training in Burkina have systematically closed. And certain countries, unfortunately, which are our neighbors, have also automatically closed military relations with us, have sought out our trainees who were at home. We responded in kind too, but we understood that we can train ourselves, we don't necessarily need them. Because training is a question of experience in war, and we readjust by taking into account certain parameters for new recruits. So we start at a pace that may seem slow, we have to recruit a lot, but we also want to train them well, equip them well, so that they can be effective on the ground, because the threat is growing. Okay, precisely the reorganization of the army, comes back a question from Arma Diallo, and he asks what's the result on the ground with this strategy. If we didn't have to reorganize and create organic units, we wouldn't be able to hold out, it's not possible. Because as they said, as soon as we took our turn, you saw that the intensity of the fighting went up a notch, and we had to adapt automatically. And in our army, when we say a unit, it's people who live together, who know each other and who fight together. And when there are situations, they are ready to all die together, but they can't have certain behaviors. For a long time, we haven't fought as a unit, we like to say in our jargon, it's contributions. Each one sends some soldiers, we gather them, and we can drop them somewhere. It's still not finished. There are certain positions that are still in this configuration, and it's difficult to fight like that. You go out and find yourself on the ground, and you don't know each other well. You're not used to it, you don't even know his name. You're being attacked and you don't trust him. Like a football team, if we start to gather people who have never seen each other, who do not know each other, then it is very difficult. And all our detachments were like that. Our units were like that. And so we quickly understood that we have to change because we ourselves have done that. I have been on the ground with men that I do not know. And I tell you that you are blue, you go out, you arrive, you do not know what to do. You do not know who to trust yourself, it is very complicated. So today we have organic units that have allowed us to contain the situation. We have created a lot of balls, and at the police level we have reorganized Agomi. They have more than 10 that have been able to contain the situation in certain areas at the gendarmerie level. It is the spirits that they have created. There are 3, I think, who also ensure security on certain strategic axes, so we will continue to create organic units. The army is currently reorganizing itself to put an end to these detachments where there are contributions within a given time frame. So to have organic units, and we will continue in this direction. There, we will have a very well organized army and units worthy of the name. While waiting to collect other concerns from the listeners, Mr. President, how is the coordination of the fight against terrorism within the AES space done today in light of the attacks that are increasing in the AES space? Yes, the coordination is going very well, and as you said, the attacks that are increasing, the AES is a target. So seeing Africans unite is not good for other people. So they say we must do everything to break this alliance. We understand. But that's what we are here for, and that's why very early on, we started to immediately set up liaison offices in each country. So there are Burkinabes in Mali and Niger who are participating in the operations center. There are Malians, Nigerians in Burkina Faso and so on. So in each country, there are teams of officers who have been dispatched to act as liaison, to coordinate at the operations centers everything that is done in inter-arms. I spoke to you earlier about training. We did a lot of training together, and if you remember from the beginning, there are people who reported in the media of Guinean special forces who were here. They came to help us train. And in the AES, we had a lot of training together. You must have seen rumors that circulated about Burkinabe forces at the airport and so on. We trained together, but we also fought together. Every week that God makes, you will find Burkinabe and Nigerian units together maneuvering. So the coordination can directly be almost perfect. Whether in the land or at the level of the air vectors, we manage to support each other very well as much as we can. So currently, it is the Sahelian force which is in gestation, what you call joint force. There will be the clinical staff which will therefore be set up with a very large force to be able to act in all the space, and it is something which can take perhaps a few months. And Idris Sawadogo calls from Ouagadougou and asks why former President Damiba is still not extradited to Burkina. Thank you. Thank you, Hervé Kabore. Before starting with the questions, why is President Damiba still not extradited to Burkina Faso? Okay, so on this issue, I think that there have been for some time these proven implications in these destabilization projects and everything. But it's the last project where it was linked to terrorists, so we resumed discussions with the Togolese authorities. Today even maybe we should see each other, but with these charges that I had to have with my people, I decided on myself at this meeting. We are on this because, in all honesty, we did not want to behave unpleasantly with the former president in the early hours. Whatever people say, he is a former president. So I had told Togolese authorities that he can stay there, we have no problem. And we communicate very well about everything that is happening with the Togolese authorities, and there is really no problem on this aspect. As soon as there are certain visits, They tell us, if he wants to carry out certain actions, they actually warn us. And currently, I think that they too must be shocked and surprised to discover what is there. But we have already spoken on the phone. We cannot speak on the phone about quite sensitive subjects. We must see each other physically to talk about a certain number of subjects, and it's not once that we do it, so you will be situated on this question. So you reassure public opinion that he will be extradited to Burkina. I do not reassure, I hope. If I say I reassure, I would perhaps have lied if it is not done. I prefer to tell you that I hope so. Okay. We will answer the question of the gentleman who wants us to raise the age of recruitment of the FDS to allow many people to participate in the fight against terrorism. I think we have already noted ages for people to participate in the fight against terrorism. I think we have already noted that. If we raise too much, they will not have too much time of activity. Last year when we went to Fada, at the university, students expressed precisely that we had just launched the gendarmerie competition, I think. I immediately instructed to take back the press release and raise the age of recruitment. I think it was done. And currently, this year, we are up to 35 years old. So 34 or 35 years old for the soldiers. And the academy had also launched recruitment with an age a little restricted, but they redid the press release and raised the level. Here is the age again, so I think that where we are at, the level where we are at is not bad anyway. If we raise it too much, we will recruit people who will not necessarily be physically able to keep up with the pace of the training, and that could still pose a problem of aging in the army in a few years. So we have to calculate all the before acting, but we will study.